So welcome to our eco-village and the land. When we talk about permaculture and eco-village design, this place is known now, 20 years along, as one of the lawful permaculture sites on the planet. And a lot of what that is really because we've taken permaculture design and eco-village design and married that into a container on this 25-acre regenerative living demonstration site and education center. And this site has had thousands and thousands of hands per year co-creating a space that is really just a commons. And the commons is a common space for the common people to do the common work. And what you have here is a co-working space. And the design of it means that there's many organizations and elements that come together. So while we're on this tour, you're going to hear and see all of our life. And the interestingly unique time that we're in has a number of folks in a mask even. And a lot of that's because we are trying to navigate how do we live in these chaotic and turbulent times, and what is a way to take our permaculture design work and our lifestyle design and put it together now with an element of living we've never designed for before. And so let's go along and check it out. Here we are kind of at the front door of our eco-village, and we've joked here saying during the pandemic we've actually started cleaning out spaces and starting to make a big pile of stuff that's not usually necessarily in the common space. And as we are around, we're working on finishing projects, and there's a lot of stuff that is haphazardly placed, but you can still see that we're in locations that have beautiful natural buildings. And as an example, in 2012, we created the 0 Mile Eatery. And this is the Eat Your Words classroom from the outside. It's a 150-person space for sit-down meals where we talk about food as medicine. And we really look at how food is central in all of the hub of the community life that we create. And then the design of regenerative living. At the base of this building is just a straight cob construction. So cob is clay and sand and straw, and we usually mix it with our feet over the last 20 years. So there could be, upwards of over 2,000 mixes put into a space like this easily. We have a great permaculture course where we had 75 students building the wall at the same time. The next part of the building is actually a Robert Laporte light clay straw building. And all the wood that's on here is either salvaged or recycled materials. So we have pulled the nail out of every single shake that's used as siding, sometimes 12 nails in every single shingle. That's been used to cover buildings. And upstairs under the board and batten is a straight straw bale construction. And so an example of this kind of very large infrastructure, kind of unusual in the natural building movement to have this large of buildings. But in this case, it's built in stages. It's built by a variety of different kind of building methodologies. And then when we get to 2-story, we often use siding. But it is all completely done by hand, salvage, and contribution. And we're looking at using natural materials as much as possible. So if it isn't salvaged, we look at the most unprocessed and chemically free materials we can find because of laminates and finishing products, etc. So this is an artistic endeavor at the same time, and this is kind of where the hubbub of activity is at the village. At any given time, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic on the planet, you might find any one of 10,000 learner connects here through the year. And so it's important to have inside space as well as outside space on the 25 acres. Places for people to eat, sleep, be cooked for each other. And then as well, we're going to kind of go backwards into this large rectangle of a space because you can't see it on the camera as well. I'm going to kind of give you that we're going this way, but we're going to make a circle around. There's many paths on this journey, but we're going to take the one that we're taking today. And I'm also going to just motion up towards our community classroom where we hold conferences gathering spaces, large guest speakers, large events move into that as an indoor space. And the beauty of that is it's also all hand-built, handmade, natural building upstairs. Often our buildings, some of them are hard to tell from the outside that it's a clay building, because in this kind of climate here on the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver Island coast, you actually want to have wall covering, wall finishes that protect earthen buildings. They're of the earth and they will go back to the earth if we don't have, in our case, we say you want a good hat and good boots. And so the roof overhang, super large. The roof, the rise on the foundation, we want to see 2 or 3 feet sometimes of protection on the bottom. So let's go along and we'll see what we can find as we go. Again, a lot of the artistic work here, we have natural building colloquiums. We have groups that come here from all over the world, timber framers, builders that work with mud, people that are sculptors, artist builders. Most famously, this building is known as an Athena Steen work of art because she is an incredible, she's actually from the nations in New Mexico, Pueblo peoples, who have worked with clay for generations, going back through time. But in this case, she knows her plaster mixes and her colorants and her sculpting, and she has the most fine cut on a palette. So you'll get groups of artists that will flock here to work with Elka Cole, who is an architect builder who started the school here with us 20 years ago. And Elka has been working or living all over the world, but as an architect and a designer, she's had her hand on a lot of these buildings, and you can tell, because I always say, if it doesn't have a 90-degree corner, you can pretty much imagine that Elka was here. Her most favored is to have form and function, but as an architect, you can see that a curvilinear building actually works well in this kind of bioregion. We are in an earthquake zone here in the Pacific Northwest in particular, and curvilinear buildings far outperform rectilinear buildings. Square buildings do not do well in the case of an earthquake pattern, whereas curvilinear can actually travel the pattern of the building along with the earthquake. So these kind of overprove themselves on many different levels in terms of green building. Let's keep going. An interesting part of the construction that's going on at this point is that this new building is attaching itself to an old building that's just being redone. And this old farmhouse and the eatery, dormitory space, kitchens, all links together with wastewater and waste systems that take every building together and take the showers and the sinks and the toilets even. Gray water and black water are combined to bring together a repurposing, and it goes through all these decks that are being built, sent through bubblers and drop tanks, and then up to a high point on the land to go through gray water treatment that happens through man-made wetlands. And those wetlands are actually part of a provincial government in British Columbia's federally funded project partnership, where the village actually provides the flush, and hello dogs, the village provides the flush, and that flush actually becomes the micronutrients and the irrigation for our food systems in our food forests, not our annuals, just in our perennials. And a great part of that is this is the first time this has been allowed in Canada. So it's kind of part of our lawful permaculture work, where we design, we work with the regulatory officials, we keep reworking the process, and then they actually, one of the main regulatory official did a pro bono design to implement the system, and then we partnered with the federal government for the actual installation costs, and Now it's a system everybody can look at and say, is this going to work? How's this going to work? What's the long-term impacts? So this is a research center as much as a living experiment. And we're, you know, from composting toilets onwards, always trying to see where to push the next envelope edge on how can we become more sustainable and legally be permitted to do that, not just here, but anywhere in Canada, and then country to country. Permaculturists and eco-villages are working together to try and bring together those legal elements as we go. Coming on down to the healing sanctuary. So a lot of people have seen this picture around, if not on our website. I noticed this particular angle of this building on websites all over the place. Twice as beautiful from the front, but we're going to go on an angle towards our healing sanctuary, which is also known as a federal government of Canada climate change demonstration building. So in 2002, seems like light years ago, we made a proposal to build a natural building that could be a demonstration project for research purposes. And Elka and myself came together and pitched this on as an internship as well. So this is the first natural building in Canada to be monitored for 10 years by the regulatory authorities. And this is the funny stuff that we get ourselves into at our eco-village, and probably within the permaculture movement in general. What it means is usually the researchers pick up the dime. We're paying the annual reporting and assessment, but it's contributing to a much larger body of knowledge. And working with academia, working with government, working with business and corporate even, to try and pull together new allowances for these kinds of buildings. And historically, well, really historically, this was the way everyone lived. And then more recently, in conventional construction, you wouldn't do this in the public eye. You wouldn't build these buildings and go and talk about them on anywhere that was visible. You actually hid these kind of buildings. And this was probably our craziest attempt, and unwittingly, we said, all these natural buildings need to come out and be seen and be shown, but we didn't realize what that was going to create in terms of the challenges, or even just not having the street cred to think that really, really, really green buildings are actually a viable concept that's a healthy and affordable option for living in. And for some reason that became cutting edge. What might be common sense suddenly became award-winning. And, you know, I'd venture to say that people 100 years ago were building like this and nobody was giving them awards, and they had extremely viable homes that were incredible. And, you know, there's examples all over the world. There's still more natural buildings in the world than not. So I'm not even sure where I got that statistic from most recently, but this is a great thing for Canada, is to try and create an example and then move it forward. The building, again, is a hybrid. On the north side of the building, it's built with a straw bale infill on the walls, so like a full bale, R40, R50 for an R value of insulation is double the building code requirements. North side, no passive solar gain. It's really where we want to see the good insulative quality. The south of the building gets all the passive solar potential, actually is designed always with some form of construction that's thermal mass. And thermal mass might be stone, it might be monolithic clay or monolithic adobe as cob, but something that will take in the passive solar and hold it, and it becomes part of the living building system. And So you can also see on this building we have a living roof on top of the building, and that has a whole mechanism for evaporation cycles. It's part of the living design as well. The rainwater is harvested off the roof. It looks like it's going down small rain chains, and those beautiful little cups are actually harvesting water into barrels that you can't see underground. And each rain chain's barrel goes to the next one, all on a gravity feed line. So you then take your gravity spot to the lowest part of the building and you put a retention water tank there. So you've now harvested your rainwater basically for free. It's not mechanical, it's not going to break down. We call it poor man's rainwater harvesting system because it really isn't a big cost and you don't have to be super technical to do it. Some of our systems are really high tech and they're run on computers, and we have PLCs that can run the entire float systems from the man-made wetlands. And others are the old farmhouse we just ran by. You can toggle between the washer and the sink and the bathtub, and you can water every plant outside off of there. You can harvest rainwater, gray water simply, or you can water in a really complicated ways too, because it's big scale to little scale. And in permaculture design and in village design, we're talking about some villages are 20 people, and some are places like Oroville Eco Village, and you've got 5,000 plus people perhaps. And so large, small, urban, rural, permaculture and eco-village design principles apply across all those layers of where do we live in the world and how do we design our lifestyles. Let's keep going and check out some of our camping spaces. This is a very funny thing when you start hanging out with natural builders. It's very akin to the slow food movement, and now there's the slow money movement. I call this the slow building movement. So you don't slap up a house in 6 weeks like conventional construction. It could take years if you're doing it as an educational process. One big piece of advice, a lot of people come to eco-villages and think, you should run a course. You could build your house for way cheaper because you'll have all these people doing it. I would caution you that that's a myth, probably, depending on who it is. But when we teach, it takes us about 5 times longer to do something than if we just crewed it and we were our crew and we all built it. And so this is one of my historic examples that I love. This started with an amazing guy from Spain who handcrafted the stone foundation, and it was going to be a signpost. And then the next year it turned into a totem pole, and then it sat with naked cob for another year, and then last year it turned into a tree. I'm like, wow, over a 4-year span of time it had its own evolutionary process. But people will just art deck out every kind of natural building and have fun with it. This is a beautiful project we did with Mark Lakeman this year from the City Repair Project in Portland, Oregon. We have teachers who come from all over the world. We're like, okay, we need an intersection repair project, a la, not Portland, not city streets, but a rural little backway path on a farm had an intersection. This was the intersection repair project that happened. Behind it you can see a root cellar and a cheese drying room. And the fun of these buildings is one side is done by grade 3 class, and the other with the dragon is a high school group. So in a place like this, you can have all learners be included. It's a safe way to build. It's there's nothing that's gonna harm somebody but knocking over a bucket of clay on themselves, perhaps. And it means that the artist in all of us gets to come out and play, and you've got technical teachers who, you don't go out and do a weekend workshop and go build your house, but you certainly can be one of the people who makes it really beautiful, and you want to rely on the technical understanding of construction as part of that. But Kids get in on it. We have thousands of kindergarten to grade 12 students every year here who actually realize they are builders. They realize they are farmers, and they realize they are artists. So this becomes a compilation of the love and the connection from all of those very young humans to people who are in wheelchairs that have worked on these buildings. I dare say a group of law students that really questioned the legal potential and outcomes of liability on certain things. And we had these great conversations, like no matter who it is, something happens when you are putting your hand to your learning process rather than just sitting in a classroom. Here we can keep going through our camping space. And I want to welcome you to the one piece of a project that is coming alive, and you're going to see here at this eco-village a lot, but this is part of a dragon. And the dragon is part of a bigger 20-year vision to awaken the dragon. So here we are in the days of COVID-19 and wondering what the future is going to look like. The dragon that is literally being sculpted out of cob, it's got good boots, it'll have a good hat. Right now its hat is really just a tarp. But the sculpting and the art of community is actually a call for us all to awaken and to lean into no longer fighting with things and slaying dragons and that whole mythology of bad things out there. It's actually an invitation to stop that kind of perceptual way and to awaken our dragons within. So you can have artful, philosophical conversations and create all kinds of things out of that when you gather people. So here we are in the spring, and usually this place is filled with people. Like, you'd have a hard time getting around here without a lot of sound effects going on from many, many human beings. And now we're kind of leave our projects. We're moving much slower, and it's a different intention that's happening at this time. But life is alive here and thrives in one way or another into the same principles as always. Permaculture and village design have all the shared components. And we try and look at things like relative location and the principles that we've been talking about in this introduction to permaculture and eco-villages this weekend. And I want to point out the applied awareness of those. So everywhere we go, if you're on the tour and you want to shout out like relative location, that something is placed situationally close to somewhere else. We're going to walk into our food gardens in a minute, and the zones and sectors that we're describing move out from that central gathering space. Closest is the most interacted spaces for the relative location, and our salad gardens and our culinary herbs, and then we move out to things that need less and less of our daily attention, all the way to the back of the 25 acres that has nut trees, because they really don't need daily tending. But our humans do. Our hearts need daily tending many times a day, so we kind of circle around this area, and we have to create spaces to live. In this case, this is a little habitat that was built by and lived in by Elka Cole, and as an architect, she decided that the artfulness of designing an art studio was important. And I can really challenge us to notice that this building is built on a very steep kind of area, and when we were mapping the land and looking at sectors and doing our design work, Elka said, "We should build this building right here." And a number of people asked, why would you do that? That's so difficult. And the response came back in a unified way that if you can't build food there, and it's not used for another reason, then you should put a building there. Don't build your buildings in your most sought after space for growing food or beauty or ceremony, whatever holds your community cohesion. Put buildings in the least needed spaces or the least beautiful spaces and let them have that impact on the land. It's a little bit more work. You can see the buildings step down the hillside. We often talk about how a group of architects came from Ontario and were so excited at our rusty metal siding on the buildings, and we were kind of worried about people talking hippie stuff and thinking like, oh, you guys are kind of crunchy granola and look at all your recycled stuff. But they explained to us, do you know in Toronto they're getting like 5 times on the dollar selling places by having recycled material on it? They actually beat up building materials so they can increase the value of the built area and the real estate. So however you get there to recycling and salvaging, different people for different ethics, but the idea of how do you pull that into a design is really important. And here at this eco-village, at our eco-village, we've got 90% of this site has been through salvage materials. So we're pulling buildings down in order to put stuff back up. We're salvaging all this post and beam and timber frame that we see, all the milled wood on site came from 15 logging trucks of windfalls that weren't burned off in slash piles on the hillside. Those trees got another lifespan by being in a building instead of burned off and away and just wasted. And so many students got to learn how to work with wood. And so this is our art studio and a little bathhouse that goes with it. You can see really vibrant colors that come with earth tones or the colors that pop. And from behind this building on, there is paddocks of food. So we've designed it so you can move poultry through these paddocks. You've got a very obvious slope on this land, and it's north slope. So a lot of people come here and go, why would you have had a permaculture demonstration site in the middle of an area called Cobble Hill because it's all rock? Why would you create an eco-village here? And you know, many of you probably already know people like Sepp Holzer, who has built food whole systems on the steeps in Austria. And how can one man or one system produce food for so many people? If you can get Jeff Lawton out greening the desert and creating out of a wasteland whole ecosystems of food, surely we can do it in Shawnigan Lake. And even if it's on a north slope, even if there's no soil on this land, we've spent 20 years building this soil now, but it was actually part of the process. One of the great elders of our local community from the biodynamic world said, don't come to the beautiful biodynamic farms on the other end of the valley. They're already doing a lot of work there. She said, go down to this end of the valley and go where it's hard, go where it's needed. And she said something really significant. The best eco-villages in the world are beside Chernobyl. Go where the work is the most needed for the application. So, you know, not a south slope, not 3 feet of alluvion soil, but by terracing the hillsides and building our food forests into the terraces, and then having livestock and poultry integrated in, lots of livestock and poultry waste. We are slowly, all the food waste that comes out of our 0 Mile Eatery, not that we waste food, but anything that comes out of there starts building into the system that builds the soil, that builds the possibility of now we're growing. Now we have over 65 varieties of fruit and nut trees and berries. No, we have 23 kinds of berries, but we have many kinds of nuts and even more kinds of fruit trees, and all that builds into an ecosystem that layers over the years. I think there's a few people here from our farm team. Let's go see. So lots going on in here as we're moving through our kind of zone 0, zone 1 areas. We're now kind of at 1.5 where we're standing. It's a real intersection between the busy and going out into the further reaches of where other people live as well. Not everybody wants to live in a demonstration site and be right in the downtownness of a hubbub of people. So permaculture principles and this kind of idea, you want to stack functions and have multiple outcomes happen at these intersections. They're kind of like the intertidal zones, and we always say in permaculture design, the edge is where the action is. There's a really great action spot right behind us. This is our on-site credit union, and it's important to have a credit union. This one looks kind of unsuspecting of anything, but why would you have a credit union on a little farm? And in our case, it's actually an ode to Van City Credit Union. And Van City, who's been one of our major sponsors over the years, amazing social purpose credit union in this province in Canada, had some project officers from a funding project come by, and our dear Tyrone, a permaculture teacher from down in the US, was here, and when the funders came through, he got very funny, and he said, "Oh, welcome to our credit union," to the women who were here in three-piece suits. And I don't think that very quickly people would understand why would you have a credit union on a farm. But we finally explained, you know what? This is a thermophilic composting toilet. It's out of the Human Manure Handbook. It's the tumble down system down the hillside. And the outcome of that is even our human waste becomes a resource. So principles in permaculture is hugely focused on zero waste and waste to resource. And even the people come here and make a contribution. They make a deposit in our credit union. Any time of day or night, come on in and please contribute. But let's come along this way. This is some of our ever-loving farm team. And in the garden, you can do a little introduction.
Hi, I'll start. I'm Lee, and I'm here for my second year of internship, and just really grateful to be alive in these times and in a place where I can live out my passion, which revolves around food, and a lot of opportunity here, working with the magic of the lands and all the loving people in the community, and maybe helping others at this time of need by what other way than growing lots and lots of food through our CSA, wonderful CSA program. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be here.
I am Felipe, I am from Brazil, and I also am in my second year here. And our mission is to grow health food for everybody close to us and for visitors and our community. And also I am grateful to be here and be a part of this team, contributing and inspiring people to grow your own food.
Thank you, you guys. This is beautiful work. We're interestingly maybe a little further ahead by not having huge groups of people here. We've been able to rock out the space, and preparation and love in the nth degree has gone into the greenhouses and the raised beds. And as far as the eye can see, we have food systems that are layers upon layers upon layers of vegetables, orchards, and culinary herbs, medicines, all combined into a shared space. We're going to get into a loud zone at the village. We're going to go right through the four-legged creatures on our path. I think it's also fun to point out we build microclimates out of things like cob or thermal mass that can hold the heat. This orange tree is growing out of control this year, I noticed, just because we've had so much sun this month. And the growth on it is, I've never seen that much. And I don't know if you notice how many oranges are on here this year. But here we are at 350 feet above sea level in the Pacific Northwest, growing oranges, lemons, pecans, Camellia sinensis tea plants, pineapple guava, Chilean guava, persimmons, avocado. What else did we just plant? Pomegranates. We're planting pomegranates. Here we go. Thermal mass and creating climate situations and doing kind of climate adjusting is like we're teaching these plants to live here, and it's kind of like us. They're learning to become more resilient, and they're learning to live into very changing times. And clearly they're thriving, so they're great role models for us. Even the pigs get palaces here. We're talking to you. You can see that the zone that's closest here into our living space is also where our animals come back at night. So because of predation, we can turn everybody loose on 25 acres, but we want to hold safe at night. We don't want to walk to the chickens' enclosure, to their coop, all the way to the back of the land at night. We make sure one coop is on the way past where everybody walks on their way home, and the other coop is down around where we all kind of eat and hang out. And so automatically it becomes easier to take care of things. If the animals are kept care of, if there is a cougar in the area, we're going to hear it. If something's going on, we can have enough people on deck to deal with it. It also means that it's adjacent to the compost production and the mulching needs of the whole land. And we've gone over that in this introduction around building soil and the importance of the soil food web and how that works. And these guys are amazing contributors too. They have their own credit union and deposits that's going on that is being used to build this up. And then even our livestock and poultry have multiply stacked functions that they're contributing as they go. They're building the soil health though, in the highest level on the land. They partner with us all the time. Even the chickens running in our food forest, cleaning up, eating the weeds. They're debugging things. They're aerating the soil. They're definitely fertilizing as they go. They provide eggs as they go. But all of those are outcomes. They work probably more hours than we do, the chickens, which is a lot. They never form a union. It's not about that for them. They're like happily in the farm system as well. So they're also like great role models. It's just like the farm team. We're all kind of like doing those pieces, stacking those functions. You can also see from here, probably not here well, but you can see from here, this project with the man-made wetlands. So if you're wanting to look at a larger scale, you could do this. I'm going to move up here a little bit more so you can hear me. So this type of design could be, this is fairly high tech, it could be much larger scale and much larger tech. This can be whole towns and cities are doing this. This is not unheard of. What makes it lawful permaculture in Canada is because after it's pumped up from here, this will have marsh plants in here, so cattails and bog iris. Those kind of plants, reed plants, actually complete the carbon cycle on the process with the filtration of the wastewater. And don't forget there's black water, toilet water in here in this system design. As it comes through these beds, then it can go down to the sorting tanks, and on the side of the chicken coop is actually a whole computerized system, and we buried underground 18 inches the lines, the distribution lines, through our food forests and orchard by hand, past every root system caringly, to put in 10,000 lineal feet of subsurface line, so the irrigation and the micronutrients goes to those food forests. And again, those are perennial tree and woody plants. You're not looking to do this on a vegetation like annuals. It's not on your salad greens when you're eating, don't worry. This is something you want to have really strict, high health standards and safety precautions around. Interestingly, gray water needs more concern and attention often than black water because of the septic nature of it, and we want to keep our animals, dogs, kids safe. The adults often can figure it out, but you have to design in location for every element of the unseen kind of, and you can't control for so many circumstances as we're living through right now. So you're always designing for kind of a plan B and C on it and how to avoid some of those things as well. But this now allows for a whole bunch of other possibilities within the industry of wastewater to unfold, and they'll come back here and we'll keep monitoring this with universities and even business and corporate kind of folks who are involved in this industry to see what is the outcome over time. It's not good enough anymore to design permaculture projects and eco-village projects and not look at the long-term impacts of that. We all want to recycle our gray water. What is the soil health in 8 years? What is building up in that soil? So we don't know we solved anything. We might always be creating another challenge, and the responsible thing to do is to keep monitoring our outcomes and have that kind of level of praxis where we apply our design, implement it, and then we keep researching and reviewing it. It's one of the reasons of having academia, business and corporate, grassroots, community, and who am I missing? Government, all at the table, because that's how we're going to create regenerative designs that stick. So now we've moved from like the really bigger infrastructure over into the farm, where we're going out of our land use zoning that I described earlier, and the way that this 25 acres is built out. We've moved from the school into more of the farm, and not that the farm isn't our school as well, but we said we keep all our educational buildings in one area. And now we come into sort of the really public meets more of the private. So we're allowed to be a school. Just to review, we're allowed to be a farm, an organic production farm. We're a residential village. We're allowed 10 homes. And we're also a park. So this is a protected space. And for us, it's a sacred space. 20 years of the sacred put in place with ceremony from births to deaths. We have a green burial site here. We have the final remains of people we love and are related to, and that is all part of what we call in permaculture design the invisible structures. All the unseen realms of design in permaculture and eco-village design. In this place, we say it's more than 75% of the place you can't see. And that's weird because we feel like 100% of what we do is very visible, unless it's on computer. But in this case, it's the culture building. It's the societal norming of trying to work towards regenerative culture. It is the work of policy. It's the development of systems that you can't see because they're underground even, possibly. So let's go through to kind of a really beautiful gathering space. It's a nice sunny day. If this was any other year than 2020, on our 20th anniversary of our eco-village, You would see an eco-village design that is pretty common through most permaculture eco-village sites with hundreds and hundreds of people. And today we stand here with kind of an empty field. This is a great gathering space that, with a fire pit by the lake and a yurt. How many people have been here for the African Zimbabwean Music Festival, and this becomes our dance floor. Sometimes it becomes our wood sorting, and we've milled, truckfuls of wood here and turned it into from waste to resource. If there's school groups here, this becomes a games area, and we're racing to see how many nails we could pull against the other team. But we'd also be able to look over towards, and we're not going to actually go straight into there today. So what we're going to do is look at from this line of caged trees, not because we think they'll get out and run away, but because our cow will eat them, is heirloom walnut trees that'll find like a 30 or 40 foot canopy, and kind of marks the feeling of an entry into our housing cluster. So 9 homes, all under construction, artist building, multifaceted construction methods, and all built as educational processes, so they built over years. You can't build we choose to not build one building while we're here. We have one building has a foundation, another does a wall system, another's doing a roof system, another's doing finishing work. Those buildings, though, form kind of the private cluster of what we created in this very unusual hybridized ownership model. So we're bringing all those activities and all those land use options together into an ownership and even a governance structure that permaculturalizes and eco-villagizes, is that a word? The whole package to be an interconnected opportunity. And this really doesn't get to exist a whole bunch in the world unless people do it behind the scenes. And more than ever, this has been the year where we're bringing every single bit of our legal and regulatory work to the table. This is a time where we need to expedite regulatory processes that have appeared as barriers to people before and have things pass over hoops. We have open trenches in our housing cluster. We have unfinished things that we can't get approval on yet. And I think common sense will prevail in a very different way in regulatory processes this year, where permaculture and eco-village design work will actually become more of a standard and the green norm in our new normal as we move forward. So thank you for being here on this tour.